Hi everybody, welcome to ESTA's podcast. I'm joined today by Morag Johnston, who's a Shetland native fiddle player, but also an international baroque player. And she's a pedagogue. She's taught at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. She's been co-director of the Huntley Summer School, and she can be heard all over Europe playing at venues such as the Elbe Philharmonie and the Utrecht and Edinburgh Fringe Festivals. She's currently researching ear playing and memorization techniques at the University of Aberdeen. And in 2020, she devised a memorization project, which she calls Scottish Whispers, which teaches folk music to students all over the world. And we're thrilled to say that she's giving a session for ESTA members on the 17th of May at 8 o'clock. Sign up now, sign up early to avoid disappointment at www.estastrings.org.uk. So welcome, Morag.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So can you tell us, Shetland, I mean, I have this amazing idea in my head of, windswept, bad weather. I have to say, I have in my head that it's got really bad weather, and lots of people playing in pubs. How far off the mark am I?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of wind, that's for sure. So you're definitely on there. Also in terms of like the music, there is music in pubs, but there's also music in the community halls, and there's music in the school. There's music everywhere, and it's a vibrant part of island life.
So how did you start playing? Who introduced you to the fiddle?
So my mum, she's a fiddle player. And I remember her playing when I was really young. And there's even a picture of me with a teeny weeny fiddle playing next to her when she's practicing. Oh. And so she started to teach me, and I had lessons at the school as well, because at that time they were really, really subsidized. And yeah, that's how I started. And she, every day after school, we'd come home and she'd be like to me, my friend Laura, right, get your fiddles out. And then we would start to play through the tunes. And later on, she started playing the piano, like we call it like vamping along, playing the chords underneath. And so we'd be playing on the fiddle and she'd be vamping along to us on the piano.
How absolutely, it sounds idyllic. It sounds very sort of Sound of Music and happy and harmonious. Was it always happy and harmonious? Were there any points where she said, get your fiddle out, Morag? Or was it always a happy, lovely thing to do?
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I mean, that time, I'm sure there was plenty of times when I'd be like, oh no, I can't be bothered, I just want to watch TV, or I want to do something else, I just want to be outside. And she was always like, no, we've got to do a little bit every day. That's always what she said.
Very good, very wise lady.
Yeah.
So when we talk about these Scottish folk tunes, it sounds like a terribly ignorant question. How many are there? Is it a massive, massive back catalogue of things ones you have to remember? Because of course, you think about the classical standard repertoire, it's all written down, so you don't need to remember any of it. But Scottish fiddler is always playing from memory. And, how much do you need to memorise to be a sort of a jobbing Scottish fiddler?
What a great question. Really hard to put a figure on it, but I suppose if you wanted like the bare essentials, so if you're going to be Scottish fiddler, probably you're going to be playing for dancers at some point, so you want to have some reels under your belt, so you'd need at least 3 or 4 reels minimum, and you'd have to play them over and over a couple of times again for the dancers. And then you'd have to have some jigs, you'd have to have a couple of waltzes, you'd have to have a hornpipe, you'd have to have, you could actually get by with very little, but in reality, Scottish musicians, they must know hundreds, possibly thousands, somewhere in there. And the thing is, you don't need to actually know like every note doesn't need to be perfect, but it's rather about when you get together, somebody starts playing and you go, oh yes, now what was that tune? And then you're like, oh, how did it go? And then you go, oh yeah, I remember. And it comes back out. So even if you haven't played a tune in like a decade, it's in there somewhere. And it maybe takes a couple of tries to get it out, but it is in there.
So did you start off playing completely from memory, or did your mum teach you to read music as you went along?
So she was actually very clever, because there was a possibility for us to learn from the classical teacher or from the fiddle teacher. So she was like, I've got fiddle covered. So she put us to the classical teacher, who did actually like show us from an early age how to read the music as well. But actually, most of the time you don't even need to have like the fluency that classical musicians have. You absolutely don't need to have that. The music there is more of a sort of guide in fiddle music. So if you want to learn a new tune, and you just want to double check something, the music's there. And But in the way that like classical musicians are able to do that sight reading, that's like this magical skill to us that isn't possible.
It's so funny because I see it the other way around. I feel like we're glued to the music, and I think it's magical that you're free like a bird. It's amazing. So tell me, you've now also, a wonderfully successful Baroque violinist. Did you discover the Baroque violin when you were in Shetland?
No, it was much, much later. So when I was in my teens, I really wanted to develop my like technique on the fiddle, on the violin really. But it's hard to find a way in actually. And I searched for a long, long time. And I tried lots of different teachers, and I just couldn't find a way that worked for me and my particular skill set. And I came to a lot of teachers, and you know that way you can see over somebody's face, oh, she's too old, or it's too late for her, whatever, you just stick to your fiddle music kind of thing. But then I met Emily White, who is a sackbut player, trombone player, but also a violinist. And I told her I really wanted to improve on my skills on the violin, but I just didn't know what way to go about it. So she said, come and live with me and my new husband in the south of England, and you'll teach me how to play by ear and folk tunes, because I've always wanted to be able to play folk tunes. And in return, I'll show you Sefchak, I'll show you how to be a classical musician. And we thought it would be a skill swap that would last a couple of weeks. So a year later, we're still doing it to this day. I'm still teaching her folk tunes. We're still like playing through music together. But she was like the door opening to this world. And it just happened that she was a Baroque violinist. I mean, just purely by accident. And when I started playing her instrument with gut strings, I just fell in love with the sound. And I mean, the repertoire is amazing. And I've never looked back.
What similarities do you see, if any, between Baroque music and the fiddle music of the Shetlands then?
So I think the big one in the center is that it's for dance. A lot of Baroque music's for dance, and folk music, it's playing for dancers. And what else would I say? I suppose like in the Baroque music, actually, they took a lot of inspiration from folk music as well. And I mean, I know that later composers did as well, but the Baroque world, they had this sort of folk world in the background. And actually, when you look at Scottish Baroque music, it's really interesting because you'll have Scottish tunes, and then underneath somebody will have written a part for a harpsichord, which I just love, or there'll be a bit for a cello, and obviously those are not native instruments to Scotland at all. So I think there's always been this sort of cross-pollination between the two, actually.
Yeah. And what about the actual violin itself? So I presume you're on a different violin. When you're playing Scottish fiddle, you're playing on one that we would recognise as a classical violin, a modern violin. And then, of course, you've got your Baroque one. No chin rest, no shoulder rest. Always chills my blood, that. How do you find it swapping between the two?
Actually, I don't swap. I only have historic instruments now. I just do everything on historic. And then for Scottish Whispers, it's 440 because, there's people from, not just the Baroque world. So I just tune it up, but I do everything on the Baroque instruments.
With no shoulder rest, no chin rest?
No shoulder rest, no chin rest.
Very hardcore. I'm very impressed. So you're now at the University of Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Studying, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what your research is about.
Yeah, so I'm doing a master's there in musicology. And what I've done is, so I'll tell you how far I've got. So basically I got together 66 participants, which is incredible. And I taught them tunes. And I have like all these, so in the Scottish Whispers sort of experience, I walk people through all these different activities with the tune. And so basically what I did was I got these 66 participants. I had my experimental group, I had my control group, and basically they learned the tunes using this method, and then they told me how it was for them, like how much of the tune did they know, did the singing help, did the dancing help, And so now I've just finished all that, and I'm just away to do all the statistics and work out, what does the method work? Is it helpful? And if so, what parts are more helpful and which parts are less helpful?
And so I got to ask, the poor control group, were they just left on their own to learn a tune? They're given a tune to learn and then no help for it?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened to them. I felt terrible. But what I did was I was like, okay, so you're going to learn these tunes by yourself. You're going to tell me how your experience was. And then afterwards, I just, I taught them all the tunes everyone else was learning, but they just didn't have to do the questionnaires, because I was like, I can't just leave you hanging like that.
Yeah.
You've done that by yourselves.
It's fantastic. So you're going to collate this evidence, as we say, and then you'll become, Doctor of the Universe, which will be fantastic. But then, so what are your hopes and dreams then for Scottish Whispers? Obviously, you're coming to ESTA, meeting us online, 17th of May, everybody, 8 o'clock. Where else would you like to take this method, or what would you like to do with it?
I want to share these tunes, and this, so at the heart of it for me is learning together, and that it's fun, and that music is something that we share, and it's a special moment that we have together. And I want to share that with whoever is interested in experiencing that.
Fantastic. Listen, Morag, we can't wait to see you on the 17th of May. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. I'm definitely going to come along. I hope that all our ESTA string teachers will join us as well. And maybe we might even see you live at a summer school one day. We're going to try and persuade you to come along to that too. So, thank you so much, Morag.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole.